I wouldn't go to ballet. That's not my forte. It's not what I'm interested in. But I would go to Cirque du Soleil because there's a lot of other things involved, and it brings me to that market. It invents a new market, brings in all kinds of new customers into your own blue ocean that's not filled with red blood.
This is the Yield Coach Show, episode 54. Hey everybody, this is your coach Ian Brown. A few announcements. Yield Coach Capital has opened its doors to investors looking to multiply their money while working with yours truly and our varsity investment team. We recently closed our 170-acre Gainesville, Florida industrial tract, and our limited partner investors are on pace to make 2.5 times or more on their money. That opportunity is gone, but don't miss the next one. Be sure to join our investor list and never miss a deal again. You can join our investor list by the portal, which is in the show notes of this podcast. It's in our Instagram bio link, and you can also do it at yield-coach.com. If you join our investor list, we will get you the free gift, 107 questions to ask a deal sponsor, and a discount to our Employee to Entrepreneur video course, which is packed full of information and case studies to kickstart your investment success. Now is your time to take the field. I'm your host, Ian Brown. Every episode, we bring you dynamic entrepreneurs, real estate investors, thought leaders, and inspirational guests ready to open up, share their story, the good, the bad, the ugly, so you can learn lessons, gain advantages, and accelerate your own success. Very excited today. I am joined by our special guest, Mr. Josh Plave. This is a guy that is going to speak about things we have not talked about. Josh is the founder of Wall to Main. He's a full-time multifamily investor. He has a portfolio of over 15 properties spanning 1,700 units. He can tell me if that's still accurate. He got his experience beginning way back at, age 16, when he opened his first Roth IRA and began trading equities. We're going to learn more. I can tell from this Zoom, you're still a young man, so you got a lot of future in front of you. Josh, welcome to the show.
Hey, Ian, thanks for having me.
Awesome. Well, I used to consider myself a young man, and now I see guys like yourself. I'm probably technically middle-aged, and you're reinforcing that, so thank you. But tell me a little bit about yourself and your background, how you came to be this Wall to Main guru that you are.
Yeah, sure. I mean, I'm getting there too. It's I'm 33, but yeah, I did start about half my life ago with retirement accounts. So the kind of the way I typically will talk about it is I began when I was 16 years old because I was working a summer job. I was like a camp counselor or something. And my mother and my grandfather were both CPAs. And so I kind of had this whole, I got the compounding interest talk early on, and I was kind of coached to, invest, the capital that I was earning. So they convinced me to open up a Roth and, invest a good portion of it. I think it was like $2,000 at the time into this IRA. And I picked what I knew at the time. I'm still kind of obsessed with aviation. So I put it in an aerospace and defense fund, much to the chagrin of my broker. He didn't like the pick, but ended up doing really well since we've known that, defense has done pretty well in the last 20 years. So it started growing. And then from there, I kind of just started contributing to it from that point forward. Fast forward about 10 years from then, my mother and my grandfather, who I had mentioned earlier, they both at different times had passed away at that point. And what they were nice enough to do was leave my sisters and I with specifically their retirement accounts. So they gave us, what they had worked on for their whole lives. And so when we received these funds, I needed to make sure that I was going to be a good steward of the capital that they had been working so hard for their whole lives. Didn't want to kind of just put it all in the sexiest thing I could find and hope that it went well. So I started investigating and learning as much as I could. This is at the same time that I was moving, my career into commercial real estate. Ended up learning about self-directed retirement accounts, which I guess we'll end up talking about, but learned how to invest with those first passively. So I kind of learned everything there is to know about what to do with them for my own investments. And then now that I'm an active investor as well, I've kind of parlayed that into helping others do the same. And I provide education for folks who need to know how to use them for their own passive investments.
What got you into the you said the commercial, and it sounds like multifamily is your focus. Maybe you have some non-multifamily, but so you're 16, you inherit some these retirement accounts, and that's wonderful. Was it? I call it the tail wagging the dog. Was it like, okay, I have these funds. I'd like to intentionally place this capital where I'd like it. How do I do that? Is that kind of what sparked your interest in figuring out how to do this?
Yes, in terms of the self-directed angle, yeah, exactly. I wasn't sure what to do with the funds, so I learned that I could put them into what I was already doing. And once I learned all the ins and outs of that, that kind of is what shifted a lot of what I was doing at the time actively. And now I've kind of maneuvered, repositioned myself into specifically helping retirement investors.
Wonderful. Now, where is just on the real estate side? Where have you focused? How did you get into multifamily? There's a somewhat high barrier to entry. So you are a very unique guest, and we're going to focus on your core competency. But I have to know kind of how you got into multifamily, where you like to do your multifamily investing, what your team looks like. Let's just take 5 here. Kind of talk about the composition and your entry into multifamily real estate.
Sure. So I was kind of pivoting jobs. I come from a data analytics and data science background. And I worked at a variety of Fortune 500 companies. And at the time, they were relocating. I was living in Denver, and they were relocating my center all the way to Dallas, Texas. And I wanted to stay in Denver. I enjoy skiing and being outdoors. So I was staying, and they were nice enough to give us like a full year's of severance. So I had a lot of time to kind of, readjust and figure out where I wanted to go. And I knew that I wanted to get into real estate. So I started attending all kinds of local meetups. And, I went through anybody who's kind of like jumped into real estate who doesn't have like a family background of real estate. You look at flipping, you look at wholesaling, you look at all kinds of different methods. And I looked at all those things. I eventually attended an event that was actually at the Broncos Stadium in Denver. And I met what ended up being my mentor going forward. And it was a presentation on commercial real estate and multifamily. And I realized that once you get to 5 units and above, it's still the same commercial mortgage process. You're really just, depending on the size of the property, you're essentially just adding some zeros to the end of the transaction. It's still a lot of the same effort and work. And even on the bigger ones, I kind of like them a bit better because there's more people involved. And so there's a lot more people that are partnering and bring their competencies to, the table. And you're getting a lot more eyes on the deal. It pencils out in many different ways for many different people. So I really like that team aspect. And so I felt very comfortable jumping into larger multifamily. I actually started with it because I like the team aspect, and I realized it didn't really matter the size of the project as long as I had the team that was, needed to accomplish it. So did multifamily, and at this point now, mostly what we've been doing is focusing in the Southeast. I would say mostly. Most of our properties have been in Tennessee, Georgia, and Florida. It's your typical, value add multifamily, which is going to be like, mid 1980s build and on. Nothing huge, deep value add, not reinventing the wheel, just going into anything that had maybe been, poorly capitalized over the last 10 years and injecting some new life into it.
Straightforward. We had Shannon Robnett on the show in the past month, and he's like, he cracked me up. He goes, if you want excitement, jump out of a plane. He's like, if you want to gamble your money, just go to Vegas. He's like, but if you want to invest, pick something vanilla, boring, tried and true that you can repeat, scale, and grow. And I may keep saying that my entire life. I just thought it was such a great answer. You want excitement, jump out of a plane. I think some people think their investing needs to just mirror like some crazy lifestyle they saw on Instagram. But no, I like what you're saying. The managerial value add, the light CapEx value add, maybe taking a 1980s vintage property maybe into a B or a B plus. No, I think there's a lot of room for that. You're still well below replacement costs. And we're going to talk about a lot of this self-directing and how you can get into some of these deals. But one of the other advantages, and I heard you talk about this maybe in one of your YouTubes, is the availability of non-recourse financing. There's still a heavy responsibility on the operator, and you have to do your due diligence. But it's nice that there's not a 10, 20, 40, $50 million loan to personally guarantee. And you also get to take advantage of the leverage. And some people talk about it having the government as your partner. When you get to a certain size, is kind of how it is. So, all right. Well, wonderful. I totally understand your business plan. I like it. I applaud it. Congratulations for getting, so many units under your belt. If you don't mind me asking, what was your, you said you were at a conference or a real estate event. Who ended up being like your mentor?
So is Mark Kenny from Think Multifamily. We've been working on a number of deals. Haven't done all of my deals with him, but provided me with a lot of the education I needed to find the partners mostly and find the people that I wanted to work with going forward.
And maybe just a quick little side note on that. I mean, the mentorship side, it's very hard for somebody to kind of sit where we are right now and not have somebody, whether it was formal paid mentorship or a relative or a friend, take you under their wing. I would argue that it's almost impossible. So I think the part of it is just letting your shield down and being open to information. I'm a Florida attorney, broker, appraiser, investor. I try to be more humble every single day because there's so many people that still know much more than me that are ahead of me, and I just try to be a sponge. So I think for those that are trying to just white knuckle it and don't seek mentorship, it's just a hard, lonely path. You said something earlier about doing the multifamily that I completely resonate with the larger deals. So I was essentially a solopreneur until fairly recently. And I love making it a team sport, getting the right people in the right position and within their core competency or the Brandon Turner superpower, whatever you want to call it. But there is something, 1+1 is 3 when you get the right people in the right seat, doing the right job over and over and over again. And you mentioned penciling, having lots of sets of eyes. That's the other thing. If you start doing this alone, you have to do everything. So maybe you're running your QuickBooks, you're going to site visits, you're running due diligence, you're talking to title and settlement, you're trying to fund your loan. Maybe you have to bring on some limited partner investors. My Lord. And then what about operating the asset? What about when you've done this a few times and it's starting to just snowball? So it'd be very easy to make a critical error if you didn't have the right team. So don't try to eat all the cookies, share some cookies and go far. So, all right. I'll pause on that. So coming back to your platform, like I said, I was on your website, and I'll go ahead and mention it earlier. We can talk about how to find you later. But Wall to Main, like Wall Street, wall2main.com. And you have some short form videos that I was watching before this podcast appearance just to get to know you a little bit better. And they're good. So I'll just mention it early in the show for the audience. You go to wall2main.com. Josh has a series of videos that are going to explain more what we will be talking about, maybe starting now. So let's talk about your Wall2Main platform. I think we kind of know why you founded it, but let's pick up there with Wall2Main.
Yeah. So generally, I started it mostly from an education standpoint. It actually came from my career within self-directed started because I had kind of gotten to that point where I felt comfortable talking about it because of my own personal experience. So I spoke at a local real estate meetup that we were hosting, and I gave a presentation. It's very engaging, went pretty well actually. And my friend who I was hosting it with, at the end of it, he said, "Hey, that went really well. You should try to actually like raise capital off of this and talk to people about this and make it more of a business." And so that's actually what I ended up doing. So I created those videos you mentioned, creating another series as well while we speak, essentially trying to help folks understand every question you can need to know. It's the same thing you were talking about with multifamily. If you try to do this on your own and you just learn a couple things that you see online and you just go at it, there's going to be a lot of stuff you did, like a lot of unknowns that you didn't know that you were going to have to come across. And so I'm trying to come up with every single obstacle or question I've ever gotten from investors, build them into education and content for folks, teach them how to navigate those types of things, teach them how to strategize and actually structure their accounts and their investments to specifically, maximize their returns and generate greater stability in their overall portfolio.
All right. Now, getting kind of a little bit more into the meat and potatoes, I have some questions. They're not in any particular order. It's just from I watched one of your previous interviews and I looked at your website. So forgive me if they're not really like sequential, but I have some thoughts here, and I'm kind of breaking the script on this episode because you're a unique guest. I knew we weren't going to just be exclusively talking about real estate, so bear with me. Um, First thing I wrote down was you mentioned people can pool their money to hit some minimums and invest as a larger LP, a larger limited partner. Um, can we talk about that just as a segue? There's lots more to talk about, but let's take our recent deal. We did a modest but still meaningful $1 million raise this spring, and we bought 170 acres of industrial, and it was behind. I think there's gonna be a problem with this for your structure, but it was behind a seller financed first position debt. But the LPs came in. It was a 506C, so they had to be accredited. We did a $50,000 minimum. But I might pause there for a second. We can get to the debt discussion, maybe next. But would that be something where people could, on their own or partner up, come together and invest in that deal with a self-directed IRA?
Yeah, absolutely. Once you establish a self-directed account, you could certainly invest. What I've done and kind of what I was speaking to in those videos you probably saw is when you establish an account, if let's say the minimum is 50, 75, whatever it is, if you are able to combine, I do this with my family. If you're able to combine multiple accounts into one entity, so we'll create like an LLC, we'll take all of our retirement accounts, we'll pool funds into that LLC, and then we can actually meet the investment minimum at a lower personal minimum. So instead of putting 50 or 75 into a deal myself, I might only put in 25. Other people might partner with me and put in 25 themselves. And so we can actually pool things together. You can do that with cash if you want to, but the point still remains, you can pull these kinds of things off and actually maneuver into different things that you possibly didn't have the funds to accomplish on your own.
Wonderful. And with some of these minimums, it's not uncommon for 25 to 50. I see some groups having $100,000 minimum limited partner investment. So I feel like there's this trend in some of the masterminds and just some of the conventional wisdom out there in the thought leadership community to raise these minimums. I think the idea is if you can raise 25 from one guy, just make it 100 and just save time and just have a higher minimum. I have to say, I'm 41, and a lot of my peer group that could possibly invest, let's say they are accredited or sophisticated, I feel like 50 is still a pretty high barrier to entry. And I understand the wisdom of people being like, well, how are you going to raise 5, 10, $20 million, $25,000 at a time? I get it. But I also like the idea of access, open to the part of it is like creating, if we do what we say we're going to do, which is take money, we're a good custodian of it, and we multiply that money in, 5 years or less, I'm going to create a raving fan. And so I'd rather have a bunch of raving fans, let's say at age 40. So by the time I'm 45, 50, 55, and whenever I stop doing this, and maybe I'll never stop, there's all these people that I made happy, 5, 10, 15, 20 years ago. And if I raise that bar, it's less raving fans, and maybe it's harder on me to get these people on board. But assuming I can do what I say I'm going to do, I want to get people on board and give them access. So, yeah. And as far as like the accreditation is, I assume that's just unchanged. So if you have, because obviously you could be accredited or non-accredited and have these retirement accounts. So I assume you go through the same verification process, you pool together or don't pool together. Correct, Josh?
Yeah, it's completely unchanged. If you're accredited, your retirement account is owned by an accredited investor. So it's all the same.
And I think I know the answer, but if you pool your funds, obviously everybody, if you wanted to do like a 506C for accredited investors, you would just need to pool with other accredited investors with your retirement accounts.
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay. And since we're on this topic, what about, I think I heard you in one of your videos doing a lot of deals on the sophisticated versus the accredited, and you're the guest. Do you mind maybe kind of speaking to why you like doing that or why you have been doing that personally and maybe some of the benefits?
Yeah, I've done both at this point. And it's mostly to your point there is, greater access. I can help. I've found this, in my opinion, amazing vehicle to future growth in my life, and I want to share that with the people that are in my life. I want to share that with people that otherwise, if you don't have $1 million, it might be hard to get to $1 million. If you have a $500,000, you won't be accredited, but now you can maybe invest in a deal and start to work your way towards accreditation. So I really like the idea that it actually helps those who haven't, found the incredible success that a lot of accredited investors have. And they're working really hard, but they're able to find investments that maybe can propel them and help, not just them work towards their future, but have the capital they've earned also work towards their future.
Now, one of the things that you cannot do and that you talk about in your kind of educational content is you cannot be, I'm going to use my own word, but like an active participant in the deal. Can we kind of direct this conversation to that topic of kind of what you can and cannot do? Guys like me, I'm a classic GP operator, active investor guy. So I may one day flip and just be an LP, like in everything that I do. But for now, I'm the front man. I'm the GP. But let's talk about kind of what you can and cannot do on the activity side.
Yeah, and it's a great point. It's kind of, it could be the biggest trip up that a lot of people face if they're trying to get a little too creative with things. So the point of I kind of like to say you need to think of your retirement account like it's another person. There's you and there's your retirement or your self-directed retirement account, and the two of you really can't interact at all. You can't work on a deal together. So because it's a retirement account and it's not an actual person, it's not allowed to earn any active income. It's money you've earned. It needs to rely on its own capital to grow, and so it can't rely on your outside influence. So the way I kind of explain it is, if you wanted to buy, let's say a short-term rental, let's say you buy an Airbnb, and you decide that you want to invest. Let's say you buy it with your retirement account. You can't rent from it yourself, because if you were to rent from it and you were to pay $1 a month, that means that you're gaining a ton of benefit from your retirement account. If you rent from your retirement account and pay $10,000 a month, that means your retirement account is gaining extreme benefit. And so that's prohibited. So you're not really allowed to have those kinds of interactions to avoid those types of transactions. And so because of that, it moves into the active role. So when it comes to commercial real estate, if you're an active participant in the deal, you're actively earning income yourself, and you would actively be influencing the growth of your retirement dollars. And so I love my deals. I can't place any of my retirement capital in my own deals because my own active inputs would be influencing the benefit of my retirement account. So they need to stay separate. I basically take all of my retirement accounts, I invest them into other syndicators, other people I know, their deals, keep them separate. If you are just passively investing, the nice kind of, I guess you could say, loophole around this is you can invest your cash and your retirement funds into the same deal if you're passively investing. So if you're just an LP in a deal, you don't have to worry about this at all. You can invest any kind of funds you want together to invest in a deal.
It's funny. I flipped to my last question that I wrote down after looking at your material, and it was, and you just answered it. Can you be an LP and a GP in the same deal using self-directed funds? And it sounds like that is a no.
Big old no. Yeah.
Big old no. Okay. And I had a feeling, but I wanted you to say it because you are our expert. And that's fine. I think a lot of the people that are probably disillusioned with their with their portfolio right now are thinking, okay, what else can I do? We can't go back in time. We can't change, but from time period now, when we're recording this, the fourth quarter 2023. So the investor mindset right now is almost, it's probably changing more rapidly than, maybe right when COVID started, you had a lot of quick chaos then. I don't think people's mindsets changing quite as fast as that particular moment in time. However, you do have a lot of people that are like, especially coming up on the end of the year, going into an election year and wondering what the hell is going to happen. How long are people going to stomach this kind of high rate? How long is this high rate going to last? Are the sellers going to finally wave the white flag and be like, take this shit. I need to, and nobody really knows. I think that I'm in Florida, and I believe you said you're in Charlotte.
Yep.
Yeah. So, I
Yeah.
mean, and you invest in the Southeast. I mean, a lot of these assets. So I'm just old enough to where I was an appraiser in the go-go days through the downturn. And then I went off to law school. So what I noticed is, and these are just my personal observations, I'm not a professional economist, but back in the last fall, one thing that is completely different is we were shedding 500,000 jobs a month or more. So you had a major, major, major employment issue. And with the absence of employment comes the absence of people able to pay their mortgage, pay their rent. Everything started to circle so quickly. And couple that with some of it was actually predatory lending, but let's set that aside. But just generally bad lending, forget the predatory side. You just had loans that were going to reset, or the way they were structured, they're going to put a lot of average owner occupied people in a bad spot. We just don't have that right now. So I'm watching to see unemployment still incredibly low, below 4% in a lot of my regions. So most of those that want a job have a job, and compensation has gone up. So those aren't the only things to watch, but I just remember the bloodbath, so much of it revolving around employment and people's ability to pay debt obligations. We don't have that right now. You're in multifamily. I'm in multifamily, not to the degree that you're in. I do still have a personal portfolio, and we have had, knock on wood, we have had no problems. We had a little hiccup during COVID, not too bad. And we've had no problems with maintaining modest rent increases, and our collections are great. So I'll pause there. We will stick on your topic, but what are you seeing with your investors, the mindset here in that fourth quarter 2023? Are you seeing any changes, or, if you can, I hate the crystal ball question sometimes, but just what are you seeing right now? Like kind of like your steady objections that maybe didn't exist a couple of years ago.
Yeah. You bring up a lot of good points, because there's so much going on. And the feedback I'm getting from a lot of investors is there's just a lot of unsurety in what they're doing, and what their plans have been. Because there's a lot of multifamily properties that are, they're having a hard time servicing their debt. A lot of folks they're a little tepid on the asset class, even though the fundamentals are there. Like the vast majority of properties that are struggling around the country, the fundamentals are there. They're increasing their rents. The occupancy is high. They're keeping their expenses low. They're actually performing properly. It's just the debt service has been really expensive. And so because people don't know where the debt markets will be, and the capital markets are really starting to tighten, credit's really hard to find, and it's tough to get new loans. We're not sure, like, if people bring properties to the market, theoretically more properties come in, prices are going to start dropping, but will people have the debt needed to actually pay those the prices that are being asked from the sellers? So there's a lot of things that are pushing from each angle. And so because of that, I'm seeing a lot of investors just kind of taking a step back, trying to see where things are headed. Maybe if there's a smoking deal, they'll look into it. But the average deal that, we've seen in the past that really could have performed normally, and, you would want like a single or a double, maybe it just doesn't have enough to it that people are a little, more concerned right now. But the fundamentals of multifamily are still there. It's just an odd time to be in the market.
Yeah, I tend to see the same. I think people kind of have like concrete shoes on right now, and they're just not really sure where to step. And so, all right, well, kind of moving back into those that are like this self-directed conversation. I kind of cheated earlier because I hinted at like debt structure. So the recourse versus non-recourse, let's talk about why, commercial and of course multifamily. I'm just going to call 5 units and up in commercial industrial. We're just going to call it non-residential commercial. Why a lot of that is more suitable for your like self-directed investment.
Yeah. So because the retirement account we've mentioned isn't, it's not a real person, it can't make a personal guarantee. There's no person to make that guarantee. You're unassociated from the account. And so because you can't make a personal guarantee, you can't invest with recourse debt. And so even if you were to buy, let's say you're trying to buy a single family home with a retirement account, you would still need to use non-recourse loans. And those can be harder to find if you're not doing commercial properties. You need to have a good banking relationship. The rates aren't as favorable. The terms just aren't great. And so it's difficult to find one that actually works for a self-directed account. There's just fewer lenders out there. And so I really like commercial real estate for a self-directed account because virtually all commercial real estate will typically use non-recourse debt. And so it fits that perspective really well. And then once you're in with a retirement account, I love it because most of these commercial real estate investments, they're going to be holding for 5, 6, 7 years. They're longer, periods of time. I have never once, in all of the investors I've spoken to, had questions about, hey, that's a really long time horizon. I'm really concerned with that because it's a retirement account. People aren't really touching these accounts for 20, 30 years already. So they're okay with a longer, horizon of investing. And so it pairs really well because it's got that non-recourse side and you're okay stretching out the investment for a longer period of time. You're not as, don't need to access the funds right away. So it really matches what your investment goals are with the retirement account in the end.
And Josh, even if the LP is insulated from that personal guarantee, let's say it's a general partner or a KP personal guarantee on the commercial loan, that would still be prohibited for the self-directed LP investor because the entire deal is relying on a personally guaranteed debt.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you for that clarification. All right. So, I know what you're saying. Most of the non-recourse loans are commercial. That's a fair statement. I think a lot of us can think of many of the personally guaranteed smaller or mid-sized kind of regional commercial deals. And to Josh's point, you might just have to float up the asset class ladder a little bit to get your self-directed funds into a compliant vehicle. Your friend that's doing, maybe he's doing little industrial or strip center or office, or a lot of those local commercial banks, they are going to want personal guarantees. So you might need to be thinking to if you're going to do this, ask your operator about their debt structure right away so you can rule it out if it's going to be ruled out. And you might just have to float up larger multifamily loans, to Josh's point, normally non-recourse. And then CMBS lending is all non-recourse. A lot of your bigger commercial loans are going to be non-recourse. All right. Now let's talk about, it's funny. I was like, what are some of the things online that people say about like the downside? And I was like, I just gotta needle you a little just to have a little bit of fun since you're here. So I literally took a photo I Googled disadvantages of self-directed IRA. And I actually think some of these are kind of funny, but I just want to run through them.
I'm curious.
Losses. Self-managing your IRA may make the investing decision scary. Fees, not liquid. Lack of transparency, fraud, and prohibited transactions. And it's funny at a glance, you're like, oh my God, how could I ever get involved in this? I'll pause there for a second and I'll let you jump into, what you actually see as pros and cons and maybe shed some light on how the internet tried to scare me 10 minutes ago.
Yeah, absolutely. It's so funny, like people, being concerned with fraud. I mean, I think there are a lot of companies out there that are, they're targeting self-directed retirement accounts or just retirement investors, and they are kind of like fraudulent. You might see the advertisements on TV or on billboards or something, but it doesn't matter if you're using retirement accounts or just normal cash funds. You're still susceptible to it, and you still have to have that filter of, does this, make sense? Does it actually look like is it a good investment? But outside of that, I mean, I would say the main downside to a self-directed retirement account is it adds a bit of complexity. Like, I'm not going to lie, it's not as simple as just having your funds at like a Vanguard or Schwab or Fidelity, and you're just going to be, placing funds into the equity markets. It's right there. It's in a brokerage account. And you can just, click, you can buy, sell, super easy. This is going to have different structures. You're going to have your self-directed retirement account. If you're using a thing called checkbook control, you'll have associated LLC, and the self-directed retirement account is going to own that LLC. And so you make all your investments through the LLC. So not only do you have a self-directed retirement account, and that's going to have some compliance stuff. Every year you need to report the value, things like that. But then the LLC itself, if you're in a state that needs to, have a periodic annual filing, you might need to do that. There's just more administrative stuff there.
Mm-hmm.
If you work with the right companies and the right service providers, they'll manage a lot of that for you. And so you don't have to worry too much about it. But That can be one of the downsides. There's just more unknowns. You're bringing up a lot more opportunity, and with that come a lot more, directions you need to, focus on, places you need to pivot and figure out before you get started. And so there is kind of that hurdle.
And I'm going to throw out a couple of acronyms I've heard them, but I don't really know them, and so I'll leave them for you. The UDFI and the UBIT. So I heard you talk about these in one of your videos, and so but maybe for the audience, and what we're doing, we're essentially starting to talk about some of the unique tax treatments. So in this UDFI and UBIT, do you mind expounding on those acronyms and maybe kind of pivot into some of the tax ramifications of the
Yeah.
self-directed investing?
Yeah, absolutely. So you use a self-directed retirement account. Retirement accounts are typically going to be tax deferred. We're used to them not paying any taxes at all. When you invest in commercial real estate, there is actually an opportunity for you to have to pay taxes. And so the way that typically will work is, let's say you're investing in a commercial real estate deal. Let's say it's going to be using a 25% down payment, 75% of the purchase price will be through leverage. So your tax deferred dollars, they represent the 25% of that purchase. Those will be benefiting from non-tax deferred dollars. So those are from like a bank or a lender or whoever it is. And those obviously, they're not going to be retirement capital. So your retirement dollars are benefiting from non-retirement capital and you're leveraging up. IRS is okay with that. What they say is you need to pay taxes on the portion of income that is earned specifically by the non-tax deferred dollars. And so if you are using, let's say, 75% leverage, 75% of the income will be eligible to be taxed. So the income you earn will be called unrelated debt financed income, UDFI. The nice thing is you can actually use 75% of the depreciation, the operating and interest expenses, things like that. So it really helps to offset a ton of the income that you're earning. And ultimately, when you end up paying it, it's called unrelated business income tax. That's UBIT. And so when I was investing, there's a lot of kind of unknowns to this. And when I started, I was asking questions like, well, what does UBIT look like? What's the average bill? How bad is it? I wasn't getting any answers. And so over the course of that year, I actually ended up building the only UBIT calculator. So I can take all of the income and all of the expenses and everything, the projected numbers, plug them into this calculator. And instead of just getting, pre-tax returns, I can actually get post-tax returns for a retirement account. We use that. We offer it to anybody who wants it. It's on our website. And we also run all of our deals through it so we can specifically find deals that work best for retirement accounts, because you can find ones that will be totally not tax optimized for a retirement account. You can find ones that are going to have a lot of, depreciation or different expenses to help offset the income you make. Typically what I found when I've run thousands of deals through it, I haven't seen a single deal have to pay UBIT, the tax, on the first roughly 5 years of a deal. There's usually enough losses to help offset any income you're making on like cash flow. It's typically going to be at the capital gain event. So when you're actually selling the deal, that's when you're going to see a tax. But it really doesn't end up being anything too bad. I like to say, like, in the end, I use this phrase I kind of coined. It's called UBIT hunting. So I don't mind. I kind of actually look for deals that have high UBIT, because if I understand the concept and I understand what goes into it, if I'm seeing a high UBIT bill, that typically will mean that I'm actually seeing a lot of income. So I'm okay with paying maybe a higher tax, because overall the total returns I see even after the tax are higher. So you're giving your retirement account the opportunity to leverage up the returns. You're having to pay a tax for it, but it gives you a greater opportunity for growth.
That makes sense. So with the UBIT hunting strategy, let's say, Josh's deal hits year 5, it's right on schedule, you guys sell. Because obviously a refi, those proceeds wouldn't be taxed, but I don't believe. So with this sale capital event, does that money then fall to the self-directing investors as if they were not self-directing? So are you taxed as if it was a normal long-term capital gain? Is that where it falls?
Yeah. So it uses the trust tax tables. Okay. So there's the ordinary income, and then there's the capital gains table. The ordinary income, this is, if you ever see people being like, oh, UBIT's the scariest thing ever, it's a terrible high tax, it's the ordinary income table that they're talking about, because it goes up to 37%. I haven't really seen that ever, at least for commercial real estate. I haven't seen that ever been used. It's typically going to be on, as I mentioned, the capital gains rates. Those are, I believe, 0, 15, and 20%. So you pay all that on that table. I've found when plugging all this in, the average tax rate over the life of a deal is about 12%. It's nothing crazy and outrageous. It's probably somewhat in line with what you would pay if you're just doing tax or cash.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, not that bad in the end.
Wonderful. No, I agree. And I think most of the deals that I've done, they've landed on that 15%, the long-term capital gain. You hold the asset at least more than a year. I sold one about 2.5 months ago, and it had pretty big net proceeds. And I was looking at that, and it's funny because you're excited and you're popping the champagne, and literally before you've even taken the first sip of champagne, you're like, what the hell is the tax bill going to be on this thing? And it's tall. It was 15%. You can plan for it. And a lot of people talk about the lazy 1031. We had a gentleman on the show. He's talking about the lazy 1031 is just essentially making sure you find, it doesn't have to be a real 1031, but find a replacement property. I probably shouldn't even use that word. Find another asset to throw in before the end of the year so you can start running depreciation against it to offset your gain. All right, but that's a different topic though. So, all right, so we know about the unique tax ramifications. I was hesitant to ask you questions that are like a little too narrow because I think it's a great kind of broad topic for the show. But you talk about how like some people have the retirement accounts with an employer and some don't, and let's just say you're listening to this show, you have that entrepreneurial mindset you're working on. You're not an active investor. Maybe you work for I'm in Jacksonville. Maybe you work for the city of Jacksonville or something, and you don't control your retirement account. What would somebody have to do if they wanted to say invest in an apartment with you or do something with their directing of the IRA?
Yeah, so this typically will work best for at this point, you're probably thinking of a specific retirement account you have or some funds somewhere. It'll work best for one of two ways: either old retirement funds like 401ks that you've had with previous employers. Maybe you've rolled them over into an IRA. Maybe they're still sitting as a 401k with that old employer, or IRAs that you've established yourself over time. It could include 401k rollovers you've had from the past or IRA contributions you've made yourself. Those types of things, they're in your control. And so you can actually take those and as whenever you want, you can put them into self-directed retirement accounts. If you are still working a W-2 job and you have a 401k with your current employer, those typically won't be able to be used because they're under the administration or that they're under the control of the administrator for that plan. You'll need to use what's called an in-service rollover. It's a very infrequently found benefit with most 401k packages. I've seen it mostly occur with big tech companies with really shiny, nice benefit packages. Outside of that, maybe it's sometimes available for folks who are over 59 and a half years old. You can sometimes take the funds out of the employer's plan. But outside of that, if you don't have an in-service rollover, you would essentially need to leave that employer to be able to free up those funds.
Okay. And then just to have fun with these nuanced topics, you talked about solo IRAs and hitting kind of the low self-employment thresholds, why somebody might want to try to, fall under a solo IRA versus a Roth. Because I feel and I could be totally wrong, because again, I'm a real estate guy, and I have plenty of friends that are wealth advisors and financial planners, and I love them to death, but my mind is it's just in real estate. So I feel like a Roth IRA might be, and I could be totally wrong, I feel like that might be kind of the most common entry-level retirement account. And if that's not true, forgive me, but it seems like a lot of people have those, and you got that, I believe it's $6,000 a year you can put in there without any tax consequence, and you put it in there. So, and let that grow. Then you have these other accounts like the solo IRA and in the solo 401k with the higher limits for contributions. I probably should stop talking here soon, but can we kind of talk about some of the differences, where people might fall? And a lot of the people that I associate with, and I know some of them listen to the show, they're 1099, maybe solopreneurs, maybe have an assistant or a VA or some other 1099 people that work with them, probably not more than one employee. They probably, not all of them, let's say you're in commercial real estate services, whether it's brokerage or whatever it is, They probably hit some of these income thresholds, lower six figures. And, so I think they might qualify for a lot of the hypos that you started to talk about in your videos. So I'll pause there.
Yeah, sure. So there's really two different main types of self-directed retirement accounts. They're going to be the IRA and the 401k. And so if you have a self-directed IRA, that's no different than a normal IRA. It has all the same rules. Self-directed is just kind of a marketing term. It's going to have the same contribution limits, income thresholds for Roth accounts, stuff like that. It's just in a self-directed vehicle that you have control over. Then there's also this thing called the solo 401k. And so this is for entrepreneurs or 1099 contractors, folks who have their own business, and it's a solo business. So you have no employees. You can't have any 1099 contractors who work more than, I believe it's 500 hours over the span of 3 years. Essentially, it just needs to be yourself. It can be your spouse as well. And it can be really infrequent part-time employees. If you have something like that, where you're just earning some self-employed income, you can sponsor a solo 401k. There is no income threshold you need to meet. Theoretically, you could earn $1 and do it. I wouldn't necessarily suggest that. That might be a red flag for the IRS. You might want to have some amount that's worthwhile. But if you can establish eligibility for a solo 401k, you can roll over you can roll over traditional IRA funds into your solo 401k. You can roll over any kind of current 401k funds. If it's with an old employer, you can bring in Roth or traditional 401k funds. You can bring those into your solo 401k. The only kinds you can't bring in are a Roth IRA and an inherited IRA. Those cannot go into solo 401ks. Now, the reason you'd want to do a solo 401k, there's really two main purposes. The first is higher contribution limits. So if you're earning a lot, it allows you to stuff more money away into a retirement account. There is the employer and the employee contributions. I don't remember the exact numbers, but the concept is that, in the past, if you have a normal 401k, you can contribute as the employee. Your employer might give you some amount of match. As the actual, you act as both the employer, the person who's sponsoring the plan, and the employee who's benefiting from the plan. And so you can give contributions as the employee, and you can give also other contributions as the employer. And so it gets you up to somewhere around 67,000 in terms of like total contributions you can give. Aside from that, the main benefit of a solo 401k is that if you're investing in real estate with a solo 401k, it actually totally eliminates the concept of UBIT. You're no longer needed to pay any kind of, tax on UDFI. It doesn't even earn any UDFI. So you could theoretically take a solo 401k, invest in a deal that has 100% leverage, and you could bring in all kinds of, returns if it turns out to be a good investment, and you wouldn't have to pay any tax on it. It remains completely tax-free. And so that number, the tax calculation is made at the time of any kind of transaction or any event. And so if you have the investment in a solo 401k at the time of a sale, you wouldn't have to pay any, tax on the sale itself.
And so I find that exciting. And I think that, and correct me here, because I'm just literally, I did some prep for this interview and I have some ideas. Let's say, a lot of real estate guys like myself, you might have 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 plus LLCs. Let's say you do some deals with partners, some deals are syndicated. Maybe you do like a one-off deal, just alone, a single member LLC. Well, I would think that single member LLC with no employees would probably check the box for maybe creating a solo 401k. You stop me if I'm wrong. And then you could sponsor or, have this solo 401k account. And can that person then take, they said that, call it 60,000-ish dollars a year. Does it have to be in relation to the income from, I think you used the example of the guy with like the Etsy, like the Etsy account selling $400 of quilts or something, just to check the box so you could then actually have a legal solo 401k. Where I'm going with this question is, and the Etsy example might even be more straightforward. Let's say Ian's Etsy makes like $400 a year doing these quilts, inspirational wall quilts. Can I then pump up, that can that sponsor and take, the $66,000 a year contribution into a retirement account? Do they have to be related? Because that money could have come from somewhere else.
They do have to be related. So the business itself is the only thing that can sponsor or that can, provide contributions. And so if you're only earning $4,000 or $400 from, the sponsoring business, you can't start contributing $50,000 to it. So they are related. I will say, in terms of actual eligibility and sponsoring the plan, you can use, like a solo member LLC. The only thing you need to look out for is if you have any other business, and if that business has employees, you can't sponsor a solo 401k even with a different business. And so you need to make sure across all of your businesses that the same rules apply, that you don't have W-2 employees, no 1099s that are more than 500 hours over 3 years. It applies across all your businesses, even if you're sponsoring with one that doesn't have all of that. That test has to be taken across all different businesses.
Okay, wonderful. Thanks for the clarification. And my loophole has now been closed. So what,
Sorry.
and again, I never try to make these shows about the host. They're about the guest and they're about the audience. I'm just here as an avenue to tap dance on a little bit. What would be, I just have so many of these kind of entrepreneurs that listen, or they're on their way. Most of them are active investors. A lot of them don't do much with retirement accounts. They see their retirement being, these rental homes or this apartment or this industrial building or this boatyard or whatever it is. I do think some of us we're missing out on at least some of the pre-tax, some of the benefits of using these different vehicles to get money off of the ledger before it gets taxed and then put back into deals in tax advantage scenarios. What do you recommend for somebody kind of in the world that I'm describing, being able to take advantage of some of what you're talking about, instead of just you flip the house, you buy the apartment, these active guys, I know, because I've lived that life. You do run into some tax consequences that make you gulp, and you start to think like, what could I have stashed away before the end of the year in, selected retirement accounts that I can then self-direct and deploy later, as an LP or however I need to do it.
Yeah. So you're saying kind of what different sectors work best and what types of investments, I guess.
For guys, so let's say it's take an avatar, it's somebody that maybe has a few rental properties. Maybe they aspire to have many, many, many units or industrial, but they aspire to have a larger portfolio. What are some good habits that somebody could adopt, at this phase of their professional existence, to where they're getting some of the tax advantages? What accounts would you recommend somebody opens, and then they can then start to self-direct if they want to kind of, drive the ship, so to speak?
Yeah, absolutely. So it's interesting. Like if you're a active real estate investor who has, a ton of losses, and you've found the right taxation situation where you're actually not paying a lot in terms of taxes, you may not want to self-direct because you're already getting tax advantaged situation. But on the flip side, you're not always going to be in that position. So you might want to have some funds down the line that are tax deferred, that have this advantage. Even if you have it right now, you might want to start contributing to it. So finding ways to contribute now is really important. Taking old funds, figuring out how you can roll those over. The IRS has a really nice rollover chart table that you can take a look at and see where you can move funds around to. Really just figuring out ways to get as much capital into retirement accounts as you can ahead of time. And the nice thing is, if you are active and you're, currently doing deals yourself, you probably have a pretty active network, and you know people who are doing different things. You have connections, and you can find great investments. So the thing is, you have to find passive investments with your retirement account. So you can't invest in your own stuff, but you likely know someone who's doing pretty well themselves, and they're a competent operator. So you can really, if you're active, you really have access to and can find some of the best types of investments, even if you're using retirement funds.
I like that. And I think that your point about where you are now is not where you're going to be later. And even if you're trying to conquer the world right now and get your 10,000 units or whatever your goal is, at some point, you're going to be done climbing that mountain, and you're going to have a different mindset. And I think to start stashing away tax advantaged funds now that you can deploy later or any time along the way is well taken. And you did a great job outlining different ways to get these, retirement accounts into action the way you want them. And I just think, I know there's people listening right now that are like, okay, I have retirement accounts. I look at them maybe once a year and usually just check the statement. Are they up, down, neutral, what? My friends that are in wealth management, a lot of times it's one phone call a year. And nothing against those guys, but people just, you're so detached, you don't feel like you have a role. You select how it's comprised with your financial advisor, and that's about it. And then you kind of hope for the best. I think if you're somebody who's like, well, I want to take a portion of my retirement portfolio and, put it in a deal with Josh, put it in a deal with Ian or whoever, maybe it's somebody in your market that like, and trust. At least you've described a way where somebody could do that. And if you're accredited, there will be many more opportunities. But as Josh mentioned earlier, you could go the sophisticated route. And if you need to learn more about that, just look at different accreditation standards, and we can, or DM either one of us or message us, be no problem. All right. Well, I'm going to pivot, Josh, into a couple of closing questions, mostly centered around resources. I did not prep you on this, so Godspeed. Coach's closing questions. Most impactful resources. What are your favorite business or personal development books that have had an impact on you?
So my personal favorite that I've had in the past was a book called Blue Ocean Strategies, I think is what it's called. I read it about 3 years ago. So the concept is like, let's say there's red oceans and there's blue oceans. Red ocean would be something like a toothpaste company. There's a million toothpaste companies. Really, it's not about quality and like the different features of your toothpaste. It's essentially a race to the bottom to figure out how you can cut your expenses and keep your overall purchase price lower. And so there's not a lot of innovation you can have. You can't peel away more customers. It's all about the marketing budget. A blue ocean is creating your own niche. I kind of did that with what I'm doing. It influenced what I'm doing. I'm essentially trying to find investors who have retirement dollars. And so instead of just looking for overall investors, I specifically have niched down, and I'm finding a group, a subset of people who have retirement funds and they want to invest those into multifamily. So that applies to everything. They kind of give the example of Cirque du Soleil. Cirque du Soleil is both a performance art, it's a circus, it's ballet, it's a lot of different things. And so you're getting people from multiple different, like I wouldn't go to ballet. That's not my forte. It's not what I'm interested in, but I would go to Cirque du Soleil because there's a lot of other things involved, and it brings me to that market. It invents a new market, brings in all kinds of new customers into your own blue ocean that's not filled with red blood.
I like that. I'm not a wine guy. I'm a beer man, but if you take me to the wine bar that has good charcuterie boards, I'm probably okay. And in Cirque du Soleil, I confirm that's badass. I went to Cirque du Soleil in Seattle, blew my mind. What excites you personally? What do you do for fun?
So I mentioned it earlier. I used to live in Denver. I big skier. It's one of my big whys in the end. I really like the concept of being able to live in the Monday to Friday, as opposed to having to focus all of my, passions on like a Saturday and Sunday. And so if I'm skiing and I want to ski on a Saturday or Sunday, I'm competing with 250,000 other people up and down the highway on I-70 getting into the mountains in Colorado. If I'm skiing Monday through Friday, I don't have to compete with as many, tourists and as many Denverites that are going out into the mountains. So it allows me greater flexibility, not as much time driving, stuck in traffic. It allows me to hit more powder and be out in open fields as opposed to be, ass to ass with everybody on the mountain. So, that's my big passion is being outdoors in general. Skiing is my number one.
Yeah, you might be able to see that sweet new surfboard I have in the corner. I won't go off on this tangent. I buy myself something, usually a surfboard, every time I have like a good closing, a good pop. And I find that a new surfboard, it's pretty hard to spend more than about $1,000. You can, but that's about as much as a board's going to be, maybe $1,200, brand new. It's just enough, like the anticipation, and it's just enough to kind of check that box of like celebration and not go blow a bunch of money. But I can't wait to get that board out. There's something, we're both on the East Coast. We talked about that earlier. Being in the water with the sunrise, there's something about getting out there, and it's not easy to do right now with my 3 kids, but if I'm in the water catching that sunrise, the waves don't even have to be that great. It is so peaceful, and I would much rather do it, like you said, Monday through Friday than when I'm surrounded. Nothing against my fellow surfers, but the Saturday and Sunday lineup is just a little crowded. So kind of taking control and creating the life you want to have. I love it. This is where you can take the clipboard and call the play, your single best coaching point for aspiring entrepreneurs.
I mean, I saw the biggest difference when I started focusing on one specific thing. So early on, you're going to try to find a lot of different avenues you can do, a lot of different tasks that are involved in that. When I started focusing on one project at a time, one business concept at a time, give myself 100% of an opportunity to focus 100% of my abilities on that one thing, as opposed to giving myself 40% across 5 different things and not really focusing as much as I can across all of them. I was able to master I can tackle the one thing, move to the next, tackle that next thing, and it comes out, the end product ends up a lot better in the end.
Wonderful. Couldn't agree more. That 90% built bridge doesn't do you any good. Not even if the bridge is, people say, oh, a bridge to nowhere is no good. Well, no, bridge to nowhere is not the point. It could be a bridge to right where you want to go. But if you've only got it, 98% completed, it ain't no good. So get that bridge to touchdown. I love that point. All right. Lastly, where can people connect with you and learn more about you? I did drop the wall to Maine earlier, and you can, but I hope people take advantage of that.
Yeah, so the main website is wall2maine.com. I've also released a new course that specifically focuses on, as I mentioned, every question I've ever gotten from a self-directed investor. I built a video, a presentation around it. I provide strategies and concepts that you can use in your own investments. And that is found at learn2selfdirect.com.
Nice. Learn2selfdirect.com. I'll check that out. All right, guys. Well, this has been a fun one, a unique episode, a little less real estate, a little more just investment, and a really cool niche topic with Josh. Please take time to share this episode if you gain something from it. I think most of you should have. It's a newer concept for this audience. It's not a new concept in total, but I think it's a great one that many should be taking advantage of. If you're into the socials, check us out on YouTube, Facebook, and Instagram. We post about these shows. We take some of your questions. I'll roll them right into the show, and we'll get the answers right here on air. But for now, that's a wrap. I'm your coach, Ian Brown, signing off and reminding everybody to lace up and leave it all on the field. Yield Coach out.